To a Tuesday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online, or listening on the free Extra Sports 1300 app, sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health and well-being for all. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics await you. I'd love to get your thoughts, especially considering yesterday was a holiday, perhaps. You are not in a position to listen to the show, and you have some burning opinions, burning a hole in your pocket that you would like to give out based on what happened in the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. I'm here for them. 719-247-1313. You could call or text it in. Let's start with last night. And my greatest fears were somewhat realized. Greatest fears is probably a bit strong. I thought that we were going to get a good game. And look, it got better last night in the college football playoff national championship. It got better. It got more compelling. But how many people tuned out? Did you tune out? If you were watching the game, did you tune out before Notre Dame started to make it interesting? Now, they were never going to win that game. At no point did I feel like Ohio State was going to lose that game. I thought that Notre Dame would be able to hang. And clearly I was wrong. Because you also have to consider how much did Ohio State let their foot off the proverbial gas pedal. First half, they were annihilating Notre Dame. The idea that Notre Dame was going to come out and play man coverage, and I get it. It's that old thing for any team going to a championship round. You know, do you play the way that's gotten you there, or do you alter what you do based on the matchup? Notre Dame in that first half especially said, we're going to stay who we are. Al Golden, the defensive coordinator, said, we're going to play man because that's what we've been playing. And these receivers for Ohio State just torched them. Because there isn't a secondary in America that is capable of probably hanging with these Ohio State wide receivers. Now, Ohio State has lost games, but that's where the improvement of the Ohio State defense, I think, comes in. The way they have played in these playoffs has been, on the whole, better than they had played for most of the season. And being who Notre Dame was, they weren't really a match for Ohio State. And in the second half, and you could talk about Ohio State laying their foot off the gas, but you also have to give credit for Marcus Freeman, because Marcus Freeman has shown the ability to rally the troops, right? After the Northern Illinois loss, he was able to rally them. They had no margin for error. They had to win out, and they did. The adjustments that Notre Dame has made at halftime of some of these games. So there is some credit that needs to go to Notre Dame on this. But all told, no matter how interesting or uninteresting that game ended up being, Ohio State was the better team. But yet, no one is talking about the Cinderella story of Ohio State. Why isn't anybody talking about the Cinderella story of Ohio State? Look at what seed they were. Improbable that a team seeded that lowly ends up winning the national championship, don't you think? Ohio State wouldn't even be in the college football playoff if it was still 4 teams. They only got in because it was expanded. And they got one of the last few spots remaining. They had one of the larger numbers by their name, and yet they knock off Oregon and they beat Notre Dame in the national championship. What a Cinderella story. And I'm, of course, being glib because there's nothing Cinderella about Ohio State. But I say that to point out and to segue into what really needs to be discussed moving forward, which is how does the college football playoff improve? And I start right there. And don't get me wrong. Overall, yes, there was, all the consternation about the first weekend of games, but we even kind of got that in the NFL. I'm okay with, but you know where I land on this. I don't think we need 12, but they want to do 12, and I'm not going to keep banging that drum because there's no going back. They're only going to expand from here. So working within those parameters and understanding that, I think all told, the college football playoff expanded year one was pretty good. We ended up getting enough compelling games to, I think, make it worthwhile. We got a worthy champion, right? I don't think people are second guessing Ohio State's legitimacy. So all told, it was a success. But that doesn't mean that it can't be improved. It absolutely can be. And I will start there. Next time around, whether this tournament is still 12 teams or expands to 16 as soon as next year, they have to seed the tournament. They have to seed it properly, not just throw in teams based on their rankings, plug and play. Cannot do that. It is one of the negatives about this playoff, in my opinion, that we got Ohio State and Oregon so early. Because that very well could have been the national championship. And we got it almost immediately. The biggest mistake that the committee made was that they didn't seed the tournament. They just plugged in these teams based on their ranking, and that's not how you should do it. Do your automatic bids how you see fit. Who gets in can be one way, that's fine. But once you get in, you're all thrown in, put all into not a hat because you're not drawing randomly, but you're all thrown in the same pool. All right, ASU, Boise State, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, et cetera, et cetera. You're all in. Congratulations, you have made it here. But now we are going to seed you. And we're going to seed you with the idea that Oregon, the only unbeaten team, the number one team in the country, does not get the most difficult draw of any team in this playoff. And they did. Even if they had beaten Ohio State, they would have still had a tougher road to get to the national championship, even tougher by the fact that they had Ohio State. So truly seed the tournament. And I think something that goes hand in hand here, you don't give out automatic buys for conference champions. Right? I think those two things kind of go hand in hand. Because even if they tried to seed the tournament properly and give Oregon the easier path as opposed to Georgia, You still had the roadblocks of, well, we got to give Boise State a bye. We have to give Arizona State a bye. So that, to me, is where they have to start. I have no problem with conference champions getting automatic bids, and I tend to think, to keep the legitimacy of the conference championships, that you should, that conference, going to your conference championship should not necessarily be an automatic bid, but should hold you in higher regard than a team, put you over a team that didn't go to their conference championship. But if you automatically qualify, great, but we're going to reseed you. And Arizona State and Boise State are not getting buys. And that would help them seed the tournament properly. So those two things, to me, go hand in hand, and those would be, I think, easy to do. I don't think you also have to give a conference champion an automatic bye. I think clinching a spot in the college football playoff is enough, because this is not the NFL. This is a way less balanced, a more unbalanced system than even the NFL is. So yes, ideally you would give buys to as many conference champions as deserve it. But if there's a team that plays for a conference championship that you feel is slightly better than, say, the group of 5 representative, or even in this case, a Big 12, but it could be ACC next year, or it could be SEC, who knows? You don't get that automatic bye too. We're going to give those to what we believe are the 4 best teams. And then you go from there. And I think that would make for a much better format than what they currently have. The other issue is the fact that that national championship game had almost no juice to it. Right? And I thought, and I'll admit, I thought, it's football. How can we be tired of football? Like, even today, people are talking about, well, we're so footballed out. Clearly, I am not normal, and I understand that because of my line of work. I could always use more football, especially when coming off the divisional round of the NFL, it's the national championship. Like, I get it if it was just the SEC championship or what have you, then okay, maybe I'm less inclined to watch. But this is the national championship. I didn't think that would be that much of an impediment to people because it was the game. Clearly, I am not correct in my assessment. And I don't even know how many people were actually pointing this out in advance. Like, I don't remember hearing a lot of people saying, wow, the national championship is going to be that day. I mean, maybe they were out there. There are a lot of people out there that do this job. Maybe there were people out there saying this. I did not hear from a lot of them. I didn't hear this race. I heard the seeding thing. I heard the automatic buys thing. I certainly heard the, SEC needs to get in. I heard all of that stuff. Didn't hear a lot of people looking into the future and saying, hey, that game is after divisional weekend. That may not be a good time. Perhaps college football people were just so excited that they were going to see a 12-team playoff that they did not look ahead. And now we're here and we're saying kind of took away because we're so locked in on the NFL. So I think certainly they have to look at getting this done earlier. Is it a week? Is that enough? Are we not footballed out after wild card weekend where we have a lot of games? More teams' fan bases are engaged at wild card weekend because all the playoff teams are still alive. Is that enough? Just moving it the Monday after wild card weekend, that would be enough to get some more juice to it? I don't know. Do you want to? Can you get it done before the NFL playoffs start? Because I'll tell you the ideal day, the Monday after week 18. I think that would be the perfect time. But how are you going to make that happen? I think you put conference championship weekend in peril there. I don't know how you can get all these games in. Paul Feinbaum said something the other day, and I get how it's received. But if you are someone that says this took too long and this Monday is not the right Monday, we have to be earlier because nobody wants to move it out further, right? We have to move it back. Okay. Where are you going to find the time on the calendar? Paul Feinbaum pointed out nobody wanted to hear it. And I understand when somebody suggests, hey, we got to start the playoffs the same day that Army and Navy play. And I'm sure I saw the quote. I didn't get all the context of the quote. I'm sure it being Paul Feinbaum and how dismissive he is of any form of college football that doesn't have the letters SEC attached to it. I'm sure he presented it as very dismissive towards the Army-Navy game. And if you're a college football fan, a big-time fan, you appreciate that game. But from a practical standpoint, to have that day only inhabited by Army-Navy, it seems like for the sport of college football in general, not maximizing the real estate. Can you play that game and then that night get going with the college football playoff? Because I don't know how you can have it both ways. If you want Army-Navy to be set apart, to have its own day, and not overshadow it by starting, by having other games on and all that kind of stuff, then how are you going to get the national championship to be earlier than yesterday? That's what I can't reconcile. So to me, if you want Army-Navy to have its place and be put on the pedestal that it is as the only game in town, that's fine. But to me, you can't complain about how long it took to get to a national champion and the fact that the national championship game took place the Monday after the divisional round of the NFL. Maybe I'm missing something in the scheduling here, but people want conference championship weekend or the conference championships to remain. Some people, namely the conferences, don't want to lose those. Okay, because you could lose those and you could get this thing rolling earlier. They don't want to lose that. Okay, purists of the sport and people that just appreciate what Army-Navy represents, and I appreciate it, don't want anything to impact that. And then you want the expanded college football playoff field that's going to take longer to figure out than just when you have 4 teams. There's just a lot of this, the complaining about when the game took place last night, it's, to me, comes off as having your cake and eating it too. You want all of these things that are staples of college football to remain in place while you're expanding this. Well, where do you expect all these games to get in? While we're still trying to keep in mind the safety and health of the young athletes competing. So that, to me, the scheduling is a harder fix than what I'm suggesting. All I'm suggesting is let's seed the tournament properly. Let's not give automatic buys to conferences sight unseen on who they produce as their conference champion. And I think that could improve at another level. But I thought overall it's good. The only other issue I have, of course, is I just don't think there are enough high-quality teams in college football to have this big of a tournament. I don't think there are enough good NFL teams to have 14 playoff teams. And once again, Wild Card Weekend was a case in point for me. But it's inevitable. Contraction is not an option anywhere. The NBA season, too long. It's not getting shorter. The baseball season, too long. Never going to shorten it. College football playoff, we don't need 12 or 16 teams. We need 8. Nope. It's only going to expand. So within that framework, just seed the tournament properly. And then maybe reseed. NFL reseeds, maybe looking at reseeding. But that's the biggest thing I look at, is saying it was all out of whack to begin with. And maybe some of these other issues that popped up along the way were due to the fact that they didn't seed this playoff properly. Wish we would have gotten a better game than we did last night. But Ohio State, hard to argue. Pretty legitimate national champion. 719-247-1313. Just getting going with this Tuesday edition of the show. Coming up next, are we getting too far ahead of ourselves when it comes to Jaden Daniels in proclaiming this to be the greatest rookie season from a quarterback we've ever seen? I did the legwork. I'll let you know my findings and take your opinions as well next on Extra Sports 1300. So this shouldn't be terribly surprising, but Jaden Daniels has been voted the Pro Football Writers Association Rookie of the Year. And perhaps if that is somewhat surprising to you, if you're a Broncos fan, maybe it will get you set for what I think is the inevitable, that Jaden Daniels is going to win Rookie of the Year. It will not be Bo Nix. Nor should it be. But what's kind of crazy about it is I don't think since RG3 and Luck did we get a season in which two rookie quarterbacks played at the level that Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels did this year. Now, we could go back, and I was having this conversation in the hallways here earlier, and somebody chimed in with the inevitable Marino, Elway, Kelly draft. It's like, at some point, it's okay to just be like in the last 20 years, we don't have to always go all time, although I'm leading into a conversation about all time. But just the idea that so many years, it's like you get one quarterback that is a franchise guy that we're having the big discussions about. And then you get one that's solid, maybe never that franchise quarterback, but is pretty good. And then we get one bust. Usually every year we get one of each. And as you know, in most years, 3 is about what we get. And this year we may only have 2 quarterbacks taken in Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. So it is worth noting that regardless of whether your vote would be for Jaden Daniels or for Bo Nix, the fact that we have 2 quarterbacks in year 1 that are legitimately challenging for that award, it's quite remarkable. And I wonder, the Patriots were the Patriots this year, but you almost wonder Drake May, what he would have done if he would have played the whole season. Because I liked what I saw from Drake May. They just didn't have as much time as these other guys. So we have 2 quarterbacks, not since. Yes, we could have other discussions about other draft classes where we saw 2 very productive rookie quarterbacks in it, but not since we had Luck and RG3 do we have 2 that were capable of being named Rookie of the Year. So I think that's kind of neat that we had 2 quarterbacks play at that level this year. But I was thinking about this over the weekend because there were a lot of takes about Jaden Daniels putting together the greatest rookie season for a quarterback we've ever seen. And maybe it's because of who he's matching up against this week, but my mind went to Jalen Hurts and the discourse surrounding Jalen Hurts when he went to the Super Bowl. And that spring and summer, if you recall, it was for some reason the spring and summer of let's ask everybody their top 5 quarterbacks in the league right now. There's just a slew, every NFL player was asked this question. And many of the lists of the top 5 would put Jalen Hurts in over Lamar Jackson. And I said, that can't be. Jalen Hurts is not better than Lamar Jackson. But it was people being prisoner of the moment because Jalen Hurts had a remarkable year. He absolutely did. But the idea that after just that 1 year, we're going to anoint him as one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Like, are we doing that too quickly? Are we making the same mistake with Jaden Daniels? Because not only am I seeing this is the greatest rookie season ever, which I think is worth exploring, but now it's like he's a top 5 quarterback in the league right now. Is that he's had one of the 5 best seasons for a quarterback this year? But really, we can already put Jaden Daniels above the guy I keep going back to, and maybe there's more on this list that you would like to add. What about Matthew Stafford? I mean, we just saw the guy very nearly go into Philadelphia and beat arguably the league's best defense. Yes, Jaden Daniels on the whole had a better season than Matthew Stafford. But if you're saying Jaden Daniels is one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the NFL, that's not just this year. For Jaden Daniels, it is because you have nothing else to go on. But his 1 year would trump the last few years of Matthew Stafford? How quickly we forget CJ Stroud. Already, Jaden Daniels is unequivocally above CJ Stroud. Jordan Love, Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield. Like, I'm not saying he's not above any of those guys. I'm just throwing out other names. Like, hey, these other quarterbacks have at least a couple of years of really good play. And we're already saying Jaden Daniels is better than all of these guys. Are we going to end up having some of that? Not me, because I never said Jalen Hurts was one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the league. But are those people going to have some buyer's remorse if Daniels regresses even a little bit? Maybe. I mean, that would, of course, mean that Jaden Daniels does regress to some extent, like a CJ Stroud. There's no doubt CJ Stroud this year was not as good as CJ Stroud next year. There are a bunch of reasons, or last year. There are a bunch of reasons for that. The health of his wide receiving core, the state of his offensive line, worse than it was a year ago. But there's something to be said for the league getting a second crack at you. Early on in this season, we're talking about how scoring is down. And everyone's bummed out because none of these games are any good because they're no longer the Mahomes, Allen, Mahomes, Jackson, Allen, these 40 to 35 games because the defenses have figured things out. So we learned that defenses can catch up, that defenses can figure some things out, even in a league that is so blatantly slanted towards the offensive side of the football. I think it's reasonable to think that defensive coordinators have a little bit better go at it and a better go at Jaden Daniels next year than they did this year. I mean, Jaden Daniels all of a sudden is what we're seeing this year is fool's gold. CJ Stroud is another quarterback I would throw on that list. Like, I still think CJ Stroud's a very good quarterback. So I don't know that I would say that unequivocally right now Jaden Daniels is one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the league. I'm sorry, I gotta get, at least let me get year 2 in before I make such a claim. Now, I have higher hopes for Jaden Daniels than I did Jalen Hurts. Right? I think that Jaden Daniels is certainly more capable of being a top 5 quarterback than I ever believed Jalen Hurts would be. But can we see it one more year? I think that matters when we're having the big discussion. When we're having the Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, Burrow, and then it's Jaden Daniels, considering the number of really good quarterbacks we have in the league, I think that's a little bit disrespectful to these other guys. Matthew Stafford won his Super Bowl not that long ago. Very nearly beat the Eagles. CJ Stroud led the Houston Texans back into the playoffs with not as good of a year as he had his rookie year, but still a very good year. Can we at least put CJ Stroud above Jaden Daniels at this point? So I got to see another year. But the question of whether he is having the best rookie season ever, I looked into this. And it's also pertinent because where does Bo Nix go in all of this? And what I found is, if you want to look from strictly a statistical standpoint, the best rookie season that we have seen from a quarterback is Dak Prescott. The guy threw for nearly 3,700 yards, 23 touchdowns, 4 picks, completed 68% of his passes. He also ran for 6 more touchdowns. And I think outside of Dallas, outside of the state of Texas, this is the state that should know that better than most, because what was the conversation? Man, why didn't the Broncos draft Dak Prescott? And he led the Dallas Cowboys into the playoffs. They did lose, which would, to this day, that's kind of been the way things have gone for Dak Prescott. Very good regular season, falters in the postseason. Dallas Cowboys don't get it done. But when he was a rookie, statistically, he stands out above all these guys, including Jaden Daniels. But when people say we're witnessing the greatest rookie season for a quarterback ever, they have to be taking more into account than just statistics. Dak Prescott took the helm. And I want to be careful not to take anything away. He's still a rookie, like all of these other quarterbacks. He was still a rookie, and there's a special kind of pressure on a quarterback that is wearing a star on the side of his helmet. So Dak Prescott certainly didn't have an easy go of it. But he did inherit a team that just 2 years prior was one of the best in the NFL. So Dak Prescott was not responsible for the turnaround of a team and a franchise like Jaden Daniels or like CJ Stroud or like Robert Griffin III. If I'm going to, despite Dak's numbers being superior to Daniels, RG3, and CJ Stroud, I think that's where I would move Dak Prescott to, is below those other three, because of the other parts to this where RG3, Daniels, and Stroud all took over messes of franchises. And were able to not only play extremely well their rookie year, but help get those teams into the postseason. So I would go Dak Prescott fourth. Then I would go CJ Stroud just last year. Right? It wasn't that long ago. Then the standard before Jaden Daniels came along was RG3. And I think you have to look all told at what is going on with the Washington Commanders. And maybe the tiebreaker is quite simply the fact that Jaden Daniels has won 2 playoff games. But I think, yes, when you take into account what that rookie quarterback has meant to his franchise, where the franchise was before he arrived, and what success he is having, I think you do have to look at Jaden Daniels as the best rookie season for a quarterback that we've seen. And I know Ben Roethlisberger won a Super Bowl. He was a supporting cast member. Okay, these guys that I'm talking about, Jaden Daniels, RG3, CJ Stroud, you could even throw in a Justin Herbert, a Bo Nix, a Russell Wilson. These are quarterbacks that were load-bearing quarterbacks. And they all had terrific rookie seasons. But I think what Jaden Daniels is doing, you always wonder if we're being a prisoner of the moment. I don't think we are when it comes to Jaden Daniels. I think we are seeing the best rookie season for a quarterback ever. And it may not be done. It may not be done by a long shot. Because I said this yesterday, if you didn't hear. I'm not so sure that Washington, with a clean slate, with no scar tissue from playing the Kansas City Chiefs, that would not have flashbacks, locked in a tight game late against Patrick Mahomes and company. I'm not so sure that Jaden Daniels and the Commanders aren't the best shot for the Kansas City Chiefs to not three-peat. So we might tack on to Jaden Daniels. Take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. More Drive Time Sports after this. I see the. I talked to you yesterday about where do the dominoes start to fall when it comes to the head coaching vacancies in the NFL now that Ben Johnson is going to Chicago. And they're interviewing. What a novel concept here, but also it's not a novel concept. The Cowboys are now interviewing their offensive coordinator, Brian Schottenheimer. This to me shows that the Dallas Cowboys job is not as desirable as Jerry Jones would want you to believe, which I don't know if I need to say that. I think you feel that because of Jerry Jones's meddling and because of his ability or lack thereof as an executive to help improve the football team, it's not the best job. Chicago was, and Ben Johnson, the best candidate or the most sought after candidate, chose it. And now everybody else fills in, and Jerry Jones will never admit this, and I don't think he even thinks it in his head, but you're really telling me that you're going to fire Mike McCarthy for the years of what you think is failure to get to where you want your franchise to go, where you believe your franchise should be, and your ultimate answer is to elevate his top lieutenant? Do you think that Brian Schottenheimer was sitting on a bunch of great ideas that Mike McCarthy dismissed? If they go with Brian Schottenheimer, and right now we're still in the interviewing, like other than Ben Johnson, one job has been filled, one candidate is off the board. It's still, you can cast a wide net. I don't have a problem with the Cowboys interviewing Brian Schottenheimer. They should give every coach on their staff an interview. They should. I think that is good practice. But if they actually go to Schottenheimer, I can't imagine that Cowboys fans are going to be thinking, yep, we got our guy. And I know that's what Jerry Jones is going to say, but even he can't sell that idea. If they just go to Mike, then why did you fire Mike McCarthy? Yeah. We'll see if they end up. But here's the other part. I'll still stick with Kellen Moore. I still think Kellen Moore ends up getting that job, and it's not necessarily inspired hire either. But Brian Schottenheimer, to fire Mike McCarthy, to go through all of this grandstanding and posturing and making him coach out the string and using that as some kind of weird motivational tactic and it blowing up in Jerry Jones's face just to let Mike McCarthy go and then promote Brian Schottenheimer. It would be very Cowboys though, wouldn't it? Coming up next, watching the national championship last night, I have figured out the player in this draft that Sean Payton will fall in love with, much like he did Bo Nix 1 year ago. Welcome in Drive Time Sports on a Tuesday. Ryan Kaufman with you. You can watch the show on our social media platforms at XTRA Sports 1300. Jaden Daniels has been voted the Pro Football Writers Association Rookie of the Year, which is not the Rookie of the Year, right? That's not the one that we hold in its highest regard, but it is kind of a precursor to what we are going to see, which is Jaden Daniels, when NFL honors rolls around, he will be the Rookie of the Year. And given the success he is having in these playoffs, and he might not be done, the legend of Jaden Daniels may grow even more after this weekend. Are we truly seeing the greatest rookie season ever? And if you're just joining us, I will pose that question to you. And I am saying yes, when you take everything into account, him going to win Rookie of the Year, the numbers he has put up, the success he is having. And he's not Ben Roethlisberger. I'm not trying to pick on Ben because I love Ben Roethlisberger. He had a great career. I was very high on him coming out of Miami. I love that Ben Roethlisberger turned out to be a Hall of Fame player. But you remember his rookie year, he was not exactly leading the Steelers to a Super Bowl. Jaden Daniels is leading the Commanders, who are, by the way, a much worse franchise. Jaden Daniels is finding a franchise in much worse shape than Ben Roethlisberger found the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I think when you take all of that extra stuff into account, I think we are seeing the best rookie season from a quarterback ever. But there are other candidates. I threw out some just in the last few years, right? I said RG3. Here's a good one worth discussing on the text line, Dan Marino, back in 1983. And I'll admit that a lot of what I looked at was more recent. But Dan Marino, to the texter's point, won Rookie of the Year, did go to the Super Bowl. And it was a different time, and we're going to get into this comparing eras thing. But Dan Marino's numbers that year, like I got about 5 guys on the list I have written down that put up bigger numbers than Marino. However, the success that Dan Marino had in the playoffs and he deserves to be included. I'll still take what I'm seeing from Jaden Daniels on the whole over that season from Dan Marino. I think maybe Marino, we can look at it like around CJ Stroud. Like, is that? I think maybe that's kind of where Dan Marino would be. Would you take Marino over CJ Stroud? But the best statistical rookie year for a quarterback belongs to Dak Prescott. And even when CJ Stroud and Jaden Daniels were doing the things they've been doing the last couple of years, not much mention of Dak Prescott. Which is weird because I understand that the team he took over, and I'm even moving him down the pecking order because of the team he inherited. But to not even include him in the conversation feels a little disrespectful. Dak Prescott should be in these conversations. And I just have not seen a lot of it. It's Jaden Daniels or CJ Stroud. It's Jaden Daniels or RG3. Well, Dak Prescott had an amazing rookie year. With more help than a lot of these guys, fine. But I pulled up an article from that year, and I had to laugh. And not that anybody was expecting this to be the case. But the writer that I was reading said that this is not a Lou Gehrig, Wally Pipp situation. Because if you remember the circumstances surrounding it, Tony Romo gets hurt, their backup gets hurt, and it's on to Dak Prescott, this fourth rounder out of Mississippi State. And the whole premise of the column was it's good for the Cowboys to get a glimpse into the future without Tony Romo and see if this Dak Prescott kid can do anything. But he specifically said in his column, this is not a Lou Gehrig, Wally Pipp situation. And no, Dak Prescott is not the football equivalent of Lou Gehrig. He's not one of the greatest of all time, but it did kind of play out that way, right? The Dallas Cowboys saw what they had in Dak Prescott, and they never looked back. So it kind of did play out that way. But to inherit, there's a different set of pressures in taking over a team that performed at the level that the Dallas Cowboys had before Dak Prescott took over. And all told, impressive, not as impressive as some of these other ones. Dan Marino, great call. Throw that one into the mix. Would you say that Dan Marino's season, let's say Jaden Daniels loses on Sunday. We don't have to predict or say that Jaden Daniels falls flat on his face against the Eagles defense. Let's just say the Commanders lose. And the story ends here. Was this the greatest rookie season? Because his numbers are superior to Dan Marino. It's not particularly close. But falling one game short of the Super Bowl, does that not come out in the wash? I'd go with Jaden Daniels, even if his story ends today, or more accurately on Sunday. Does he have to break through and go to a Super Bowl to be the greatest season? Because we know what happened to Dan Marino in that Super Bowl. Does Jaden Daniels just getting there make it? If you don't think he's had the greatest rookie season to this point, take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. I think you could probably put Bo Nix close to, if not into the top 10. It's not the best rookie season for a quarterback this year. And there are certainly, but I'd say Bo Nix is bordering on that for sure. And his circumstances in Denver were not that dissimilar to Washington. It's just Washington had more years of built up pain, frustration, angst. And Jaden Daniels, all told, had a better season than Bo Nix. But Bo Nix is probably knocking on the door. I didn't go 10 deep, but probably be in there somewhere. Speaking of, I told you around this time last year that the player that I thought Sean Payton was going to get quite enamored with was Bo Nix. Now, I didn't expect him to end up taking Bo Nix with the pick that he did, but I did think that Sean Payton would very much like Bo Nix and maybe like him more than others did. And in a way, he liked him even more than I thought he would have. But I knew watching Bo Nix that Sean Payton would like a lot of what Bo Nix brought to the table. With the Broncos, again with the first round selection, which is not the usual, right? We haven't had a lot of years where the Broncos have been drafting in the first round in back-to-back years. Feels like it has been a while. The player, and I'm watching the national championship game. I'm saying the player that I think Sean Payton is absolutely going to love. He's not the only one, but a player that I think that Sean Payton will love to the point that he would be ecstatic if he were available when the Broncos selected is Emeka Egbuka. And I think that just like Bo Nix, Egbuka definitely is on the needs or wants list for the Denver Broncos. There's no doubt that they need to upgrade their wide receiving core. They need more. And I'll keep saying this, and maybe Tyler Warren is an exception because he's so special. But I don't think that Sean Payton would have a tight end, even though that room is a little bit more devoid of talent than the wide receiver room is. I think that Sean Payton would rather come away with one of the top wide receivers than one of the top tight ends. Tyler Warren could be the exception, just like Ashton Genty could be an exception. I know that the Broncos are going to look running back, but are they willing to give up, or not give up, but use their first round pick on a running back? I don't know. I don't think so, but Genty might be special enough for the Broncos to do that. Emeka Egbuka checks a lot of boxes that I think Sean Payton would have. One, he is incredibly productive at the college level. He is not a project, right? There's not as much projecting that has to go into it, right? Like he's Ohio State's all-time leader in like everything now. So incredibly productive at a high-level institution, really good program, and he stands above many in his production. I think that's going to be appealing. Some teams like more talent, and certainly Egbuka, the guy on the other side of him, has more talent. He's not draft eligible at this point, but he has more talent than Egbuka. But the productivity that he has had at Ohio State, I think, will be appealing to Sean Payton. I think his route running ability would be very appealing, especially in the short and intermediate passing game, which we have clearly seen Sean Payton wants his quarterbacks to be able to execute in, and Bo Nix did. His predecessor did not. and the dude blocks. That is a thing with Sean Payton. He wants his wide receivers to be able to block if they're capable, and Igbuka is. I think that is a player, and look, I don't think it's as outside the box as maybe Bo Nix is, because there's a decent chance that Igbuka is gone before the Broncos draft. I am merely saying that with what he presents, the things that he's best at, the things he's most known for, I think will very much catch the eye of Sean Payton in this process. And look, I think it's not just because it fits Sean Payton's vision, and there's every reason to say, hey, draft players that fit Sean Payton's vision. It's gotten the Broncos this far. But I also think it fits a need for the Denver Broncos, the personnel group, because I think wide receiver is one of the places they'll be looking first. Before running back, before tight end. I think there's a really good chance that they take a wide receiver in the first round. And if they had their druthers, maybe Sean Payton can call up other teams and trick them into taking other players, because apparently Sean Payton can do that. Emeka Egbuka, just a name to keep in mind through this process. I think he has a lot of what Sean Payton would be looking for, while other teams may opt for a little bit more upside, perhaps a little more dynamism. I think Egbuka fits what the Broncos need at that position and fits what Sean Payton would be looking for in a wide receiver. 719-247-1313. We'll continue to take your thoughts on this Tuesday edition of Drive Time Sports here on Extra Sports 1300. Time to plan your big game party by placing your pre-order with Hooters. Get 50 boneless wings for $79.99 or 50 bone-in wings for $89.99. And if you are not hosting your own big game party, you can always drop by Hooters for the game on February 9th for a chance to win a custom engraved Hooters Colorado Solo stove. Either way, bring Hooters to you. You go to Hooters. Make Hooters a part of your big game plans. So we have in one corner, let's frame the discussion this way. My champion, when it comes to the best rookie quarterback season ever, is Jayden Daniels. He is my champion. I think we are seeing, all told, when you talk about the numbers that he's put up, what he represents to that fan base, the disrepair, let's call it, that the team, the franchise was in when he took over. The success he had during the regular season, the success he is now having in the playoffs. I take all of those into account and I say, this is. Then, on the text line, we have the text line champion, which is Dan Marino. So because I think Dan Marino, you could certainly argue I would probably put him maybe third, somewhere in there. But let's just simplify it. Marino, Daniels. Who had the better rookie season? Statistically, easily Jayden Daniels. However, Dan Marino did get to a Super Bowl. Jayden Daniels has not done that yet. Does Jayden Daniels does he have to win on? Because you would agree, if Jayden Daniels wins the Super Bowl, then he has to have the best with everything else he already has going for him. If he wins the Super Bowl, I think even if he goes, he has to. All we're discussing right now is if it ends now. If the Eagles win on Sunday, would you take Jayden Daniels' rookie year or Dan Marino's? 719-247-1313. To that end, I was sent a meme today that I did not appreciate receiving, but I fully expected to receive because it is the world I live in. It's the life I have led. And I was sent a meme with a map of the United States. And it showed who America was rooting for this weekend. And on the AFC side, America was mostly blue, all blue except for one little piece of Missouri. I don't even know if it extended all the way to St. Louis. I think it was just over Kansas City. Maybe some of Kansas was involved. But, Broncos fans, they reach out pretty far past the Kansas state line. It's a very small part of it. Basically, Kansas City, Missouri, that was rooting for the Chiefs. Everyone else rooting for the Bills. And on the NFC side, it was the same thing, just a little tiny dot of green in Philadelphia because, of course, Pittsburgh's part of Pennsylvania, not hoping that the Eagles win on Sunday. And the rest of it was maroon for the Commanders. And as much as that hurt my feelings, I do acknowledge that the most desired matchup in the Super Bowl would be Buffalo and Washington. And I have stated before, and this was before we knew the seedings, before we knew who was all getting in and all this kind of stuff. We had a decent idea, but we didn't fully know yet. And I said, and I still feel this way, that even if you want to see you do not want I should put it this way, even if you do not want the Kansas City Chiefs to three-peat, I think some part of you at least wants to see them take that shot. Even if it goes down in flames, even if you hope it goes down in flames. But that was before all the seedings came out. And the way I put it is this. You have to admit there would be something unsatisfying about Kansas City bowing out early in the playoffs. Right? And I will ask you, if you are a Raiders, Chargers, or Broncos fan, to either please leave your fandom at the door or just excuse yourself from the conversation. Because I understand it's very difficult to ask this question to you because you have a deep sea. You don't want the Chiefs to do anything. I'm trying to talk from a more general football fan perspective. I get it. The Chiefs are the villains of the NFL. But that is a compelling reason to watch, a compelling reason to want to see a team play, is rooting for them to lose. If you do not have some deep-seated hatred of the Chiefs that stems from your fandom, namely the AFC West, you have to say that if the Chiefs bowed out this weekend to Houston, maybe you would take some glee in that. But it'd be like, wow, they were going for a three-peat, which we've never seen. I've never seen this. Them losing to Houston, kind of an unsatisfying way for it to end. However, I fully acknowledge that in many ways, losing to Buffalo would feel like them losing on the Super Bowl stage. Right? This is a big stage. This Buffalo, Kansas City is a much bigger game than Philadelphia, Washington in terms of interest, right? It's Allen, it's Mahomes. 5 wins for each. However, Josh Allen has never beaten Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. You may be aware of this. But it will have, even though it won't be the Super Bowl, it has that kind of huge game feel. And if Josh Allen gets past Patrick Mahomes, and even if Mark Andrews catches that 2-point conversion, or better yet, he hangs on to the football earlier in the game, the Ravens win, this would apply to a matchup with the Ravens. It would be a perfectly acceptable way for the three-peat to come to an end because it has that kind of big game feel. If the Kansas City Chiefs are going to bow out and fall short of a three-peat, I think it would be more satisfying for it to be the storyline of Josh Allen finally vanquishing Patrick Mahomes. And I would apply the same thing to Lamar Jackson. I think there's more sentiment with Josh Allen than there would be Lamar Jackson, but there would be enough of it where I'd say, you know what? But to see the chance of a three-peat go by the wayside in the divisional round against the Houston Texans, but I think for a lot of people who even want to see if the Chiefs, who are intrigued by the idea of the Chiefs potentially three-peating, would be like, if they're not going to do it, losing to the Bills is acceptable. Right? The storyline of Josh Allen finally beating Patrick Mahomes and getting the Buffalo Bills to a Super Bowl. That's a great story. I think that would be okay. I'm not saying okay in my opinion, right? But I would understand it. So it's leading me here. Okay. I acknowledge for the vast majority of people, not just because of any hatred towards the Eagles or hatred towards the Kansas City Chiefs, but just from an intrigue standpoint, that two tortured fan bases having a chance to celebrate a Super Bowl championship. For Josh Allen, one of the faces of the league, one of the stars in this league, against Jaden Daniels, one of the rising stars, this phenomenon would be a great matchup. Not my preferred matchup for obvious reasons, but a great matchup nonetheless. And I can understand where that's where most of America is. And I'm not basing that off of a meme, which is wholly unscientific. I'm basing it off of trying to extricate myself, as I try to do, even though I don't get the credit for it that I deserve. I do try to extricate myself from my fandom. I will admit that I want the Chiefs to win it all. That's not influencing my opinion as far as who I think will win. But Buffalo, Washington would be the best matchup, right? Because you get a satisfactory end to the Chiefs' run for a three-peat, and then you get Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills in the Super Bowl. The least desirable matchup would be Kansas City, Philadelphia. Now, how would the other two go? What would be preferred? Would you rather see Kansas City and Washington or Philadelphia and Buffalo? And I would rather see Patrick Mahomes against Jaden Daniels, but it's hard to argue against Josh Allen against Jaden Daniels. I think my point is it's pretty clear what most people would want. I would be curious, though, if most people can agree they want to see Buffalo. And I understand that. Is it Buffalo, Washington by far? Would you like to see Philadelphia because of the Saquon of it all? But there is no doubt most people, most NFL fans would rather see Buffalo, Washington than any other matchup. And would least like to see Kansas City take on Philadelphia again. What matchup do you want to see? Now that we're down to 4 teams. 719-247-1313. The Baseball Hall of Fame has been announced. Get to that as well. And this all quarter century team for the Avs. Want to get your thoughts on that as well. More Drive Time Sports next. Going to the text line at 719-247-1313. What potential Super Bowl matchup would you most like to see? And while I do think more people would like to see the story of the Chiefs going for a three-peat, even if they want it to end disastrously, add the LY there at the end, for the Kansas City Chiefs. I think some people, more people than would admit, would like to see it play out on a Super Bowl stage. However, because you have the Buffalo Bills going against them, in many ways, if the Chiefs run at a three-peat were to end this weekend, that would be satisfying for those people because of the previous battles between Josh Allen and Mahomes, and it would be Allen finally getting past Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, and it would be and I guess I'll speak a little bit on it as a Chiefs fan. I feel like the Buffalo Bills to end the three-peat would be a worthy adversary. Right? It's one that you've had the battles with as a team, and somebody that is mentioned alongside Patrick Mahomes. It feels like the Buffalo Bills are a worthy team to end the three-peat, as opposed to, not to pick on the Houston Texans, but since that was then the Houston Texans. Right? That's how it's going to go. Where's the poetry in that? Where's the great story in that? The Houston Texans take down the Kansas City Chiefs? Like, it has to be a Buffalo or a Baltimore, or it has to be like the Patriot dynasty when the last team that beat Belichick and Brady was a team coached by Mike Vrabel. Right? Somebody that came from that dynasty. Like, I need some of that if this three-peat is going to come to an end, and you have that in the Buffalo Bills. And I think for a lot of objective observers, even if they want to see the Chiefs go for a three-peat because of the history of it all, having it end at the hands of Buffalo, I think, would be satisfying for a lot of people. And then there are some people that hate the Chiefs to the point where they just want to see them lose at any point because they don't like them. From the 719, hey, Kaufman, the Chiefs aren't villains. It's not about Allen vanquishing Mahomes. It's about the Bills vanquishing their past. I would say that if that is your opinion, you would be in the minority. To say that Sunday's game is not about their past is Mahomes. Right? I mean, not their whole past, but their recent past, this iteration of the Buffalo Bills, their past is Kansas City. So by vanquishing them, they are vanquishing their past. But if you want to bring in the Thurman Thomas, Jim Kelly days as well, I would say that you would be either a Buffalo Bills fan, right? I could see a Bills fan saying that, but that would also put you in the minority. I think so much about Sunday is about Allen taking down that team, that the Buffalo Bills taking down that team. I think that has a ton to do with the rooting interest of Sunday. Because then if the Bills win, then it becomes about what happened to Jim Kelly. Right? Once they get to the Super Bowl, then it's about the pain of Marv Levy and those Bills teams that we in recent years have actually come to respect at a proper level, even though they are labeled in many ways as losers. That's how they were labeled. We look at it and say, my goodness, going to that many Super Bowls in a row, like that was a great team. And just in recent years have we, as a sporting society, have come to realize that. And I'm glad we have, because those teams deserve their credit for what they did. But that's what the Super Bowl will be then about. This weekend is absolutely about the Chiefs, is about Mahomes, is about Allen versus Mahomes, the Bills versus McDermott versus Andy Reid. It has everything to do with the team that Buffalo is playing. And then if they get through that, then it becomes about the history and vanquishing the past. And that's why I never bought into the idea. That's why I never bought into the idea that, oh, it's such a shame that Lamar and Josh Allen aren't playing to go to a Super Bowl. Like, excuse me? They should play each other for the right to play Kansas City, for the right to go toe-to-toe with Mahomes one more time. The AFC Championship shouldn't be Buffalo and Baltimore. They should have to go through Kansas City. These playoffs are setting up the way they should. With the Chiefs waiting on the other side, Lamar and Allen, you guys figure it out. The winner plays Kansas City. And then we get our chance. You telling me that there wouldn't be not an asterisk, but some sort of like catch if the Chiefs, for whatever reason, ended up losing to Houston in or this tournament was seeded differently and in Kansas City they didn't have to go through Kansas City? It is fitting that they go through Kansas City. It is right that they have to go through Kansas City. Lamar versus Josh Allen to go to the Super Bowl. Not until they go through Patrick Mahomes. And Josh Allen and the Bills earned that. And now they take their shot on Sunday. DJ texting in with some interesting stuff that I kind of agree with. And maybe I should have phrased the question this way. Because with Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills playing Kansas City, it's very easy to be like, I want Buffalo. But DJ brings up the point that if we were looking at these teams and saying who has the most intrigue, forget conferences, obviously, you can't get Kansas City and Buffalo as much as people would want to see Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes play for a Super Bowl. It can't, right? Maybe it's better this way. Which team are you most hoping will get to the Super Bowl? And how would you rank? And which one would you least? Because I would say one thing for Kansas City, as much as they are hated, as much as many people, they have a little bit more juice and intrigue around them than Philadelphia does. Can we at least agree on that? At least you have the animosity towards that team. You have the three-peat of it all as a part of that. I get it. If I didn't have the ties that I do, if I didn't have the fandom that I do, yeah, seeing Josh Allen beat Patrick Mahomes, in a lot of ways, that would be a more appropriate way for the run to end. The chances for a three-peat, I don't want to say that the Kansas City Chiefs are done after this year regardless. But I think the least compelling of the 4 teams left is probably Philadelphia, right? I don't know what the reason would be unless you are a fan of Philadelphia or if you're a fan of perhaps Kansas City and would like to see that rematch. Like to see Philly get another shot at it. 719-24-7. 1313. Tom, intimating what I think a lot of people are feeling. Team I am most rooting for, not the Chiefs. I think to the earlier texter, I have to say the Chiefs are villains. They are. Look at the discourse surrounding them. It's not dissimilar than what surrounded the Patriots. The integrity of the games they are playing in is being called into question, right or wrong. And we can get back into that conversation from yesterday if you want to. But the fact of the matter is, the integrity of the game is being called into question, much like many of the Patriots games were called into question for a little bit of a different reason, but also not a dissimilar reason. Because for years, people complained that Brady got all the calls. And that the Patriots got favoritism from the referees. If you were questioning the legitimacy of the contest because of one team or another, then they're the villains. And that's fine. I understand that. Every team that wins, the Bulls became villains, the Patriots became villains, the Chiefs are now villains, the Golden State Warriors were villains. It comes with the territory. I fully understand it. And Tom's text kind of makes my case. Who am I rooting for? Not Kansas City. Well, why? Because they are the most disliked of the 4 remaining teams. They're villains. 719-24-7. 1313. Coming up next, the 3 stories that are driving the show. The newest Baseball Hall of Famers have been announced. An all quarter century team, which is essentially an all Avs team. Right? When you talk about the quarter century, every team in the NHL got one of these. The Avs, it's just who they are, the best Avs team ever. We'll discuss that as well as more of your thoughts on Championship Sunday coming up and also the National Championship last night. But almost forgot. And I don't know how because it's sitting here right in front of my face. If you're often feeling tired, lacking motivation and drive, maybe you're gaining weight or noticing a loss of muscle mass, these could all be signs of low testosterone. It might not be, but these are all signs. The only way you know is if you get your levels checked at Low T Center, and they make it easy for you to do so. It's a simple test, and with their on-site lab, you'll get results back right there. And if it is low T, just know you're in the right place for that because they have over a decade of experience helping patients. And also super important, their personal treatment plans are optimized for each patient. So it's the right place to go. And if you're a current patient at Low T Center, because I have been talking about them for a while, if you've gone in, become a patient, just know, hey, $150 referral credit for each new patient that you refer. One last thing. Low T Center, you can also get your health evaluated for treatments with prescription GLP-1s. All the rage right now. So get back to your best. Go to lowtcenter.com to book your appointment today. That's lowtcenter.com. Low T Center, reinventing men's healthcare. Welcome in Drive Time Sports. Whether you're listening on your radio, online, or through the Extra Sports 1300 app, which you can download for free. Sponsored by Diversus Health, Mental Health, and Well-Being for All. I certainly thank you for your patronage. The number, and it's starting to heat up a little bit. Love to see it on the text line. Couple of conversations we've been having will continue through this third hour. The Frank Serratori Show coming up at 6 o'clock for you Air Force hockey fans. But in the meantime, let us dive into the three stories that are driving the show. All right, we start with a game that wasn't much of one and then kind of became sort of one at the end. But at the end of the day, it was Ohio State that wins a national championship. Here's a fun way to impress your friends. Ohio State already had done this with multiple coaches, as you recall. But they, along with LSU, are the only schools that have won national championships with three different coaches. College football national championship games, I should say. Allow me to state that better. National championship games, when they actually have a game that says we're deciding the champion here. LSU and now Ohio State. Not quite a Cinderella story. And as Nick Saban pointed out yesterday, the system needs a bit of tweaking when you have the highest payroll. Essentially what you had, even though we're not going to sit here and pretend that all the way through the season we thought it was inevitable that Ohio State would win. But they, in many ways, are like the Dodgers are right now in Major League Baseball. It was at the very beginning of the season, and I guess it's shame on us for abandoning Ohio State after they lose to Oregon and say, oh, they're just done, forget it. Or when they lost to Michigan. You know, some coaches just have those teams that they can't seem to beat. Even Andy Reid. He can not beat the Titans for the life of him. Go look at his record. He doesn't fare well against the Tennessee Titans. They all have their teams. But the conversation at the beginning of the season was that Ohio State has spent more on their football roster than any team that we know of, obviously. Be a lot of $100 handshakes to get to the payroll that Ohio State has. But that was the conversation, that Ohio State was outspending everybody to build the best roster in college football. So it should be, in the end, not that surprising that they won. And Nick Saban would be quick to point out, you can't have one team spending $30 million and another $3. Oh, you mean you can't have one team with a decided competitive advantage against everybody else? Yeah, level the playing field. That seems interesting coming from Nick Saban. But at any rate, Ohio State wins. It probably shouldn't have been surprising. We probably shouldn't have jumped off the Ohio State wagon when many of us did. But now I think the bigger story is not Ohio State, with all due respect. But it's, okay, this was year one of the college football playoff expanded field. What do we think? I think overall it was a success. Not a great game last night. Not great games at the beginning, but I think we got enough to keep us entertained. It was more fun, I think, the conversation, I think, was a little bit more enjoyable around the 12-team playoff than the 4. I think all told, it was a success. However, this can't be the finished product. And I'm not talking about expanding from 12 to 16. I'm talking about the way they do things needs to be improved upon to try and maximize it and make it even better. It was a success this year. It can still be better. Seed this tournament the right way next time. And that goes hand in hand with no conference is guaranteed a bye. You want to really make this the best product it can be. I have no problem with automatic bids. Give the SEC one, give the ACC one, give a Big 12 one. I'm fine with all that. But to say that they also get automatic bids, that's not going to make for the best product. And we saw that. By their seeding, we should be treating Ohio State as some kind of Cinderella story. But we know it wasn't, because we know that the playoffs weren't seeded properly. And the fact that Ohio State perhaps had the best team that they would have ever faced in that tournament in the Rose Bowl in the second week, that shows that there is a flaw in the way they're doing this. So, short of them actually shrinking it and making it a tad more exclusive than 12 teams, which would be preferred by me, working within the framework of it's only going to get bigger, at least seed the thing properly. It's not the NCAA basketball tournament. You can take the time to seed a tournament and to give the easier path or the easiest path that you can, understanding these are all supposedly quality teams that have earned the right to be there. Give the best teams the easier path. That's how these things work, and they didn't do that. And I think that was part of the reason why we got some of the games along the way not being very compelling, maybe including last night. You know, maybe beating Georgia's backup quarterback or beating Indiana, which had a weak resume, followed by, you know, Georgia's backup quarterback, followed by a Penn State team that got gifted the easiest path to the semifinal with SMU and Boise State. Maybe that didn't exactly make Notre Dame as good as maybe I thought they were. The thoughts that run through my head watching a game like that last night. But I thought Ohio State would win that game. They won that game is just more of a beatdown than I had expected going in. It was college football playoff was good. Now fix it. That's the moral to the story. Story number 2, and this is broken within the last hour. The newest Baseball Hall of Fame class has been announced, and it is 3 players deep. It is Ichiro, it is CC Sabathia, and it is Billy Wagner. Those are the 3 that are going in. Ichiro, I actually want to look. Ichiro, to me, is one of the greatest hitters that I have ever seen. And my family used to travel down to spring training every year. And I watched Ichiro when he came over from Japan and witnessed that. I never seen anything like that. And now I've seen it up close from a media perspective, following around Shohei Ohtani when he was at Coors Field for a few days. But I never seen the fans that traveled from as long of a distance. And I had no prior knowledge about Ichiro before I arrived at spring training. And to see the number of people that traveled overseas to watch him play, the throngs of media, I never seen anything like it. And then I watched Ichiro, and I continued to watch him throughout his entire career. And maybe outside of Barry Bonds, I don't know that I've seen a better pure hitter in my life. And you have to understand that I missed a lot of Pete Rose. I missed some of Barry Bonds, I suppose, but he was so freaking good that I feel like I got Ichiro. I saw his entire career. And I think that's who you would put him with. You could go back to Ted Williams. I was obviously not around back then, but of the hitters that I saw all of Ichiro, most of Bonds, and not much of Pete Rose. But I think that's the conversation of the greatest pure hitters of the last however many years. Ichiro was unbelievable. And so, to me, he should be unanimous. Right? But I'll look and see if he was unanimous. Jeter wasn't unanimous. Ken Griffey Jr. wasn't unanimous. So I'm sure somebody was like, Ichiro? Nah. Maybe next year, Ichiro. Those people drive me nuts. Sabathia, I'm good with. Billy Wagner's interesting. If you look at Billy Wagner, no doubt that for his time, he was one of the best closers in the game. He was horrendous in the postseason. Horrendous. And I kind of feel like that should matter. Especially for a pitcher, especially for a closer. How bad Billy Wagner was? Yeah, the ERA over 10 in the playoffs. So Ichiro, 100%. CC Sabathia, like 97%. Billy Wagner, I think Billy Wagner's the one that you look at and say, maybe the Hall of Fame doesn't quite have the bar that it used to that you have to clear to get in. But those are the three: Sabathia, Ichiro, and Wagner being enshrined. And I'll look here what the steroid bros got. But it's more important who gets in than what the steroid bros got. But I will look into that here in just a few minutes. And then story number 3 is a conversation that I will reset here and we'll get back into it. Are we seeing, as so many people have proclaimed over the weekend, the greatest rookie season from a quarterback ever when it comes to Jaden Daniels? And I looked into it. And I arrived at the conclusion that yes, we are right now, without him taking another step forward in this postseason. I think it's certainly the greatest season from a rookie quarterback I have ever seen. But I think it's the best ever when you take everything into account. What he has done, the situation he inherited, what he has meant to that fan base, the phenomenon that he is, the numbers he has put up, the success he has had in the regular season and now the playoffs. I think we are seeing that, but there was another contender, and it's Dan Marino in 1983. Went to a Super Bowl. Does Jaden Daniels have to do that in order to match Marino? Or to be considered better than Marino's rookie year? Take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. More Drive Time Sports after this. I was looking at some of the other percentages. The next guy up for the Hall of Fame that did not get in was Carlos Beltran. Wonder how much the Houston Astros have to do with this. But he got 70% of the vote. Andrew Jones. I will say this unequivocally, one of the best defensive outfielders I've ever seen. And you think about Jones, Torrey Hunter, Ken Griffey Jr. when he was healthy, like how good defensively these center fielders were. Andrew Jones made some unbelievable catches and throws too. He had a cannon for an arm, but he made some circus catches. As far as the PED bros, A-Rod got 37% of the vote. Manny Ramirez, 34% of the vote. They're never getting in. It's never going to happen. And to me, I think rightly, no matter how you feel about the PED users, Barry Bonds is the gatekeeper. Okay? Until he gets in, none of these other guys get in. Right? If we're going to allow the PED users, suspected or charged PED users, to get into the Hall of Fame, Barry Bonds must be first. And you could, and I'm saying maybe you don't want them in, and that's fine. But I'm saying if we're going to let in any of these guys, Bonds has to get in first. We're not putting in A-Rod. We're not putting in Clemens. We're not putting in Pettit. We're not putting in Manny Ramirez. We're not holding it against Barry Bonds that he used PEDs and was a jerk and putting in a nicer PED user. We're not doing that. Okay? No matter how you feel about the PED users, Bonds gets in before any of these guys. But none of them are getting in. So it's a moot point. And, of course, my suspicion, who would say, here's the ballot: Ichiro, Sabathia, Wagner, Beltran, Jones, Utley, A-Rod, Ramirez, Pettit, those are the top vote getters. Who is the one guy that left Ichiro off his ballot? Because somebody did. It pulled a Jeter. One vote away from a unanimous selection. Who is this jerk? It's not like you got, Babe Ruth, Gehrig, Mantle, Ted Williams on the list, and you're like, oh, I just ran out of room. He's going against Sabathia, Wagner, Beltran, Jones, Utley. There is literally, he's the most deserving by far. By far. And somebody left him off his ballot because it can't be all, Rivera's the only one. Come on. It's the worst kind of gatekeeping. One person's like, Ichiro doesn't deserve. The dude showed up in Major League Baseball, and halfway through his career, the dude was 27 years old and was, from that day forward, arguably the best hitter in baseball. I'm not saying you have to take into account what he did in Japan, but appreciate the fact that he put up these numbers and he didn't even get into the league as early as he could have. He was over in Japan. People sometimes. Am I right? All right. Jaden Daniels. I have to look up something real quick, and my keyboard's not close. Hang on, Jeff. I'm checking that. See, this is what happens. I'm checking for you, Jeff. I'll get into what Jeff texts here in a moment. But Jaden Daniels today was named Pro Football Writers Association Rookie of the Year, which is a precursor to him being named the Rookie of the Year over Bo Nix and Brock Bowers. It's going to happen. And whether this is the greatest rookie quarterback season ever, and if Washington has a shot here, what kind of chance do you give them after knocking off Detroit to get past Philly or to even win the whole thing? Albert says Washington Commanders are a fallacy, a hoax, this charade. Well, maybe he said charade. I'd read it as charade. Will come to an end Sunday, hopefully, or we get a Super Bowl blowout. Jaden Daniels and the Commanders, I don't think that this isn't Rocktober, nor do I, that's not what Albert, I think, is completely saying. All right, like the Commanders all the way through the year have been a quality team, right? It's not like they just turned it on in the last month, snuck into the playoffs, and are doing this. But I what Albert is speaking to, I think is a real thing where if you look at these four teams, the boom or bust rate is much higher with Jaden Daniels. I do think that there is a chance that the Commanders can win this whole thing. Maybe I'm getting swept up in it, and I'm not saying I'm predicting it, but I'm saying they got a chance. And not just because they're one of the final four teams. I think what I'm watching from this team, I think they can win the whole thing. And I don't think going to a Super Bowl and standing across the field from the two-time defending champions is a moment that is too big for Jaden Daniels. And I think this Commanders team takes their cues from him. But I do think that the bust part of it is greater with Washington than with any of these other three teams. Because I think that on paper, they are the weakest of the three. I'm not going to minimize what Washington has done. Because people talk, well, the injuries finally kept up to Detroit. Well, they had the same number of injuries going into the weekend that they have now, and most people were picking Detroit to win anyway. So I don't want to minimize what Washington has done. But now you look at it, you have the best roster in football in the Philadelphia Eagles. You have the two-time reigning champions. And you have Josh Allen in the Bills. Washington is clearly fourth in the power rankings in terms of how good they are, right? So there's a chance that a rebuilding team in year one, not unlike Denver, does meet a similar fate to what Denver did. And maybe it is, to Albert's point, this weekend against Philadelphia, where I don't think it's because what they're doing is fraudulent or somehow they've had a stroke of amazing luck, but there's a point where Washington is just not nearly as talented as these other three teams. And maybe it takes running into one of those three teams, and maybe Baltimore would be a team like this, where they run into them in the conference championship, and it's like, okay, Now it's a wrap. I don't want to put too many words into Albert's mouth there. I'm just taking what he's saying and saying I could see the boom or bust. That Washington is the ultimate boom or bust team in this conference championship weekend. They could win the whole dang thing, or the Philadelphia Eagles, who are more battle-tested, who are more talented top to bottom, and who have Saquon Barkley, might blow out Washington. But it's not. It's just because Philadelphia would be that much better, is the way I would look at it. But I certainly think the ceiling floor, the distance between the two is greater with Washington than any of these other three teams. And I am leaning towards Philly on Sunday, but I'm saying I can make a case for any one of these four teams win the whole thing. I really can. Take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. Jeff, interjecting into the conversation. Let me look once and for all. See, this is why. Yep. Found it. Jeff nailed it. I'm firing my whole research staff. Dan Marino made the Super Bowl year 2 in 84. Now, he was outstanding his rookie year. Did not make it. Good looking out, Jeff. See, this is why I don't have the staff. I don't have the staff to fact check things on the fly. But Dan Marino had a terrific rookie of the year, which deserves conversation. But Jeff correctly points out Dan Marino, year 2, got to the Super Bowl. So by default, I win. Because Jaden Daniels went further than Dan Marino in his first year. Good looking out, Jeff. That's what I appreciate. Talking about, too, the teams that you most or least want to see in the Super Bowl. Brett says Patrick Floppy Flop is the reason America is rooting against the Chiefs. His flop does not help. I will say that. I don't know that the name Patrick Floppy Flop will catch on, but yes, I agree. But the premise of it is the refereeing, the winning all the time, the overexposure, the inundating of Chiefs content that everybody has to deal with. I went into it at length yesterday, despite not even being around as long as the Patriots were. Right? The Patriots ruled the NFL for 20 years. The Chiefs haven't even done it for 10. And everyone is saying they hate the Chiefs more than they hate the Patriots. Why? Because in this social media society of ours, you have gotten 20 years worth of exposure to the Kansas City Chiefs dynasty, packed into essentially 7 years. So who you really hate? Do you really hate the Chiefs or do you hate social media? That's really the question you need to ask. Because social media keeps putting them in front of your faces. But it's the officiating that transpired. And I said this yesterday. Will Anderson looked like he made contact, when you see the other angle, it looks like his helmet makes contact, not a ton. He didn't mash Patrick Mahomes' face mask in, but it looks like his helmet makes contact with Patrick Mahomes' face mask. And even though those two on the other play, those two Houston Texans defenders probably hurt each other and did more damage to each other than they did Mahomes, there was contact to Mahomes that, per the rules, would be reason for a flag. Okay, so by letter of the law, those calls weren't wrong, and even if they were, at worst, they were bad calls. My whole crusade yesterday was just saying, stop with the referees are fixing the games for the Kansas City Chiefs. That's what I was pushing against. My big takeaway is that we got to stop protecting quarterbacks once they commit to running the football. That's Mahomes, that's Allen, that's Lamar, that's everybody. We got to close that loophole. And part of the reason why people hate the Chiefs and Mahomes even more than they did 72 to 96 hours ago is because Mahomes has clearly found that loophole and is exploiting it. And we don't like athletes and teams that exploit loopholes. Patrick Mahomes is now gaming the system because he knows he will get the flag because he is afforded the protection that all quarterbacks are. So he's doing these other things to try and draw that contact. And that cannot be allowed moving forward. Whether it's Mahomes or any quarterback. If they're going to run the football, they are going to be treated like a running back. And it is, and I said, the flop itself unbecoming of Patrick Mahomes. It really is. Just like flopping is unbecoming of LeBron James and the level of player that he is, of really about 50 NBA players, including number 15 for the Denver Nuggets. Let's just be real here. Okay? I know Nikola Jokic doesn't get a lot of calls that he deserves, but he also fishes for a lot of calls that he gets. I don't like it. I don't like flopping in any form by anybody at any time in any sport. And that flop on the sideline was egregious. I was like, come on, dude. Like, one of my positions is I get onto the show and I try to defend the Kansas City Chiefs when I can. I cannot defend that flop. I can't. And I called him up. Well, first I did the get on the group chat with it was Mahomes and it was me and it was Travis and Taylor and Caitlin Clark and the Rizzler we just added to the group chat. And we were chatting and I was like, hey, Pat, can I call you for a second? And he's like, sure. And then I called and then he asked me how my State Farm policy was going. I said, I love it. Thank you. And then I said, dude, you can't do that. I can't defend you. I can't defend you when you do that. Indefensible. Hey, Kaufman, it's Kermit the Flop. Oh, no. Oh, no. Kermit the Flop. See? I have good humor about these things. Kermit the Flop. That's good. That's a good one. Let me take a break. Come back. Get to more of your text messages. This is when the show is better. When they're, I know Rome does the more of me, less of you. I'm telling you, when it's equal parts you and me, that's when the show is at its best, even if you are annihilating the Kansas City Chiefs on the text line. We'll get to more of your texts and have talk about tonight's basketball contest, by the way, and why we have to be absolutely done with something. Tonight, we are done, and I'm proclaiming it done. And from here on out, we will never speak of this again. I'll tell you what it is next. That's actually the perfect transition. Thank you, Nicola. So tonight, the Denver Nuggets are taking on the Philadelphia 76ers. And you know who is not playing? Vlatko Kanchar. I mean, this guy is always ducking the Philadelphia 76ers. Embiid's not playing. And it's been 1,000 blah, 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 blah days since he's played in Denver. I get it. It's like the Who's Your Daddy thing. Like, It's fun to troll as a fan base. Nuggets fans, you got to be done. We got to be done with this. Who cares anymore if Joel Embiid plays? What does it matter? The matchup that, and I get why you wanted to see it. I get some of the circumstances around him missing some of these matchups. It was easy to make fun of. It's been fun. Got to be done now. Because the matchup that you should be looking forward to on an individual level with Nikola Jokic versus it's Wemby. Forget Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid's yesterday's news. He can take his one MVP that he got mostly because people were tired of voting for Nikola Jokic, and he can play in his 15 games a year, and the Philadelphia 76ers can bow out in the second round of the playoffs till the end of time. I don't care. Done. It's Jokic Wemby. That's the big man matchup. The best offensive player in the league versus the best defensive player in the league. And they're going to be that. And Wemby's going to play. I know they load managed him a little bit in year one, but now that the Spurs are starting to win games and the Spurs are starting to build towards being a playoff team, Wemby's going to play. He's going to match up with Jokic, and that's the matchup you should be looking forward to. Stop looking forward to Joel Embiid versus Nikola Jokic. Even if it's just to troll. It's done. Like, it's not even worth the effort anymore to troll. So tonight's it. Okay, this is not jumping the year. We're done with the Joel Embiid count on how many days. Let's actually look forward to a good matchup between worthy adversaries. Wemby and Jokic. That's the matchup that we hoped Embiid and Jokic would be. Just hasn't happened. So that's coming up later tonight. More of your text messages. Brent says, why did I think of Kermit the Flop? It was right there. And I would, honestly, without looking at the number that text in, I would have expected it to be you, Brett. But alas, nope. Kermit the Flop. Brett adds, all quarterbacks are not afforded the same that Patrick Mahomes is. It's not any quarterback. It's one quarterback. Clearly, you did not listen to the show yesterday. Most roughing the passer penalties that have been enforced since the year 2020. Number 1, Jared Goff. Number 2, Josh Allen. Number 3, Ryan Tannehill. That's what it says. Matt Ryan, Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford, Baker Mayfield, Russell Wilson, and then Patrick Mahomes. And I tried to send my son to school today because he is getting razzed for being a Chiefs fan, much like his father did before him. And I said, go to them and let them know that Patrick Mahomes is only the 9th most roughing the passer penalties since 2020. And then also let them know, while you have their attention, that the Chiefs are not the least penalized team in the league. That is the LA Rams, and they are not the team that gets the most penalties with their opponents. That's the Minnesota Vikings. And then when he came home, I said, son, did you tell them those things? And he's like, no. I'm like, I gave you gold. Clearly, his age level is not ready for those complex conversations. And it was probably difficult for my 12-year-old son to remember all of those numbers. It's just not true. It's not true. Where is the metric? It's all anecdotal. It's all opinion-based. There's no metric that says that the Chiefs get a favorable whistle. There's none out there. Rich says you're obfuscating a bit. I read that perfectly. It's the timing of the calls for the Chiefs that is the suspicious part. Okay, but again, anecdotal evidence where it's a feeling. It's because this happened at this time. And by the way, the first of the two penalties that everyone's so up in arms about, and I understand where you go and you're like, really? I'm with you there. But the first one was early in the first quarter. Like, come on now. Are all of these calls really not being called or being called, depending on whether they go the Chiefs' way or not, in the most crucial moment? I think that you are speaking to very much a feeling that people have. And that's where I, again, rope in social media as part of this, because you see it, you're inundated with it. Look at this call. Well, when do those happen? So I think you're speaking to a real feeling people are having. And I'll say that alone is serious. Like, the NFL cannot have that. They can't have this suspicion from people. So they need to do something about that. And I think by treating quarterbacks like runners when they are running is a great way to help that. I don't know how you directly attack the problem, like intentionally call the Chiefs for some blatantly terrible calls just to even it out. Like, I think cutting down on some of the calls that would be considered more egregious and would be perceived as helping out the Kansas City Chiefs, if you eliminated those kind of calls for everybody, it would eliminate them for the Kansas City Chiefs as well. There was another stat out over the weekend. Josh Dubow. I hope I'm saying his name right. Josh Dubow from the Associated Press. This is the best I can do as far as your assertion that it's the timing of when these are called. Chiefs have the 7th worst penalty yard differential since 2018 in the fourth quarter and overtime of games decided by one score. So if the idea is these games are close, we need Kansas City to pull through, they have the 7th worst penalty yard differential since 2018 in those kind of situations. The worst, 7th worst. And none of this is to tell you should now love the Kansas City Chiefs. I would not say that at all. I am merely saying the idea that the fix is in is serious, that the NFL has to do something about, whether that's Kansas City or New England before them or the next dynasty, which could be Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders. We'll see. You can't have that perception. It's not good. But also, like, legitimately, I'm looking at all of these things that could potentially say, you know what? You're right. Even if it doesn't rise to the level of believing that the fix is in, just saying, like, look, the Chiefs have the fewest penalties called against them in the fourth quarter, or Mahomes has the most penalties called by a person hitting him. You know what I mean? Like, I really tried to find that. And at best, it's anecdotal, because every metric that I see says that there is no evidence to say that Kansas City is favored by the officials. There's just not. Now, all that being said, the idea that it's rigged is a problem. And it's a serious problem. But taking one step back from that, I don't want to necessarily get in the way of a good story. The rooting interest of football fans across America have been clearly drawn. And the idea that the Kansas City Chiefs are the bad guy and Josh Allen is the good guy, I very much like that. And I'm not just saying, as a Chiefs fan, I'm saying as somebody who is as a football fan who's going to watch, it's a more compelling matchup when you have that aspect to it. So whether the Bills were the bad guy or the Chiefs were the bad guy, we're having this conversation about Mahomes or Josh Allen, taking out the idea that it could be rigged, which is a serious allegation, just the idea that the benefit of the doubt, let's say, lies with Kansas City, and maybe that's the middle ground. Mahomes, like Brady, like LeBron, like Jordan, get the benefit of the doubt. And that there's nothing to prove that, but that's a perception I can agree with. And if that means that people don't like the Kansas City Chiefs and it makes Sunday good versus evil, that's great. I mean, what's the compelling factor of the NFC Championship? That's all on one side. It's Jaden Daniels. That's the story of that game. That's the layer. There's one layer. It's can Jaden Daniels continue this? The Eagles aren't long-suffering fans anymore. They're not a tortured fan base anymore. They're not the underdog. They're not evil. People don't want the Eagles to win. I don't know how many people actually hate the Eagles. The storyline in the NFC is literally Jaden Daniels. While in the AFC, it's the Buffalo Bills history. It's Josh Allen versus Mahomes. It's the Chiefs going for the 3P. It's the Chiefs, people believing that the NFL wants the Chiefs to win, and that opposing force. AFC Championship is infinitely more interesting than the NFC. So we'll have to leave it there. We could continue this conversation. Look, we got all week. So if you text in, save some of them. I will certainly pick up where we left off at some point tomorrow. Again, Nuggets Sixers, I guess, is the main event of the evening. Enjoy your evening. Really appreciate the conversation. Again, so much better when we bounce off of each other, even if you guys are being mean to me. Enjoy your evening. We'll talk tomorrow.